My family has a proud history of service in the Australian Army. My father, my mother, both my grandfathers, and many more relatives in and around the family have served in the Australian Army. But when your mum, your dad, and your grandfather, who you knew very, very well, my maternal grandfather, all served, you have a very special connection to the Australian military. That history continued with the service of my younger brother, who served in the Pacific and the Middle East during the recent wars, conflicts. Today, I want to talk about them. I want to honor them, and I want to honor the veterans, past and present. That's today on Shattered the Podcast.
Welcome to Shattered the Podcast,
sharing the lived experience of mental illness on
A father,
a mother.
a family.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Let's go.
today in Australia, it is what we call ANZAC Day. ANZAC, ANZAC. ANZAC, Australian New Zealand Army Corps. So called because of the units that landed in Gallipoli in 1915. It was units of the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps who served particularly at Anzac Cove near Suvla Bay in the Gallipoli Peninsula. It is a day that Australians particularly remember the service of our men and women in the military. Now, people overseas may or may not understand that Australia has served or been a part of almost every major conflict of the 20th centuries. We served proudly and with distinction in World War One, World War Two, obviously the Korean War, Malaya, Vietnam, Desert Storm, Afghanistan, Iraq, and with many peacekeeping missions around the world. We are a small country, but we are a country that has served and served well. In fact, in World War One, we had the highest rate of casualties, killed and wounded per capita in the world. And we were one of the only all volunteer armies that served in World War One. What does this mean to me personally? Well, as I mentioned in the intro, my father, my mother, both of their fathers, on my father's side, his grandfather and his great grandfather all served in the Australian Army. Together with my brother, that's 4 generations of fathers and sons who have all served in the Australian Army during time of conflict. My mother also served. Her dad was a veteran of Vietnam. He served during the Battle of Long Tan. He was at Nui Dat on the day, and I was fortunate that he spent some time telling me the stories of what life was like in Nui Dat, and I'm couldn't be prouder of his service. But my mum, and I want to highlight this specifically because it's only just beginning to dawn on me how much she sacrificed. She met my father while they were both in the army. In 1968, 69, 70, if a woman in the army wanted to marry and have children, she had to quit My mum loved the army. I've never heard her say a bad word about it. She's never been bitter, but she sacrificed what was essentially her entire life, her dream, to marry my dad and to have me and my brothers and sisters. Sacrifice comes in many shapes and forms, particularly when it comes to military service. I think about my mum's sacrifice. When she was a child, when she was young, she waved goodbye to her father as he went off to war in Vietnam. A few years later, she waved goodbye to her fiance, my dad, as he went off to war in Vietnam. She then, years later, waved goodbye to her son as he went and served many different places, particularly Afghanistan. Her father, her husband, and her son all off to conflicts where they could have been killed easily, and many, many were. Far too many were. My grandfather told me some stories, and they were stories that apparently he'd never told anybody before. And on hearing those stories, we realized that in retrospect, he may have been diagnosed with PTSD. He struggled for many years with his mental health and without discussing it. And he self medicated with alcohol. He would have sudden rages at times, couldn't stand having lots and lots of kids around. All classic symptoms of what might be diagnosed as PTSD because he never dealt with the mental struggles that he went through while in Vietnam. One thing about my PTSD, I don't know whether to be honored or disappointed, but when I tell people that I have PTSD, often the first question is, "Oh, you served in the military." My answer to that is just take a look at me. I would have lasted 5 minutes in the military. On the day of my brother's passing out parade, a corporal was chewing out my brother, giving him a really hard time, and I got really upset. I was, like, gonna get out of my chair, and I just felt my dad's hand on my arm. And I kinda glanced at him, and he just shook his head like, "Nah." So, that, for me, showed me how long I would have lasted in the army. The first guy that got in my face and I couldn't have handled that. I would have decked him and then would have been kicked out. I'm not ashamed of that. I just know that my personality, my psyche was not prepared at that time, perhaps any time, to have served in the military. So when somebody asks me if I got my PTSD through military service, uh, there's a part of shame that kicks up in me, a little bit like, I really didn't. That comparison comes in where I compare myself to a veteran. He has PTSD. He served in a war zone. I have PTSD. I was assaulted by a bunch of people that were disabled and had diminished capacity. When I weigh up those two logically and without emotion or insight, there's no comparison. But the thing is, there is no comparison in mental illness. Your pain is your pain. What you feel is real, and it's different from what I feel, and it's different from what other people feel, and that's okay. The trap is not to compare. The trap is to put yourself in a position where you negate your own illness because of the suffering of somebody else. Their suffering is more real. Their suffering is real, just real. Mine seems so fake at times when I compare what my brother went through, what I went through. I am extremely proud of my family. My brother, my father, my mother, both my grandfathers, great grandfather, great great grandfather, all of whom served for very different reasons. And it wasn't even a family thing. It wasn't one of those things where, well, my father served, so I will serve. My dad chose to serve because he needed to get out of the life that he was in. He was young, living in far north Queensland, didn't really have too many prospects, wanted a job, wanted security, wanted to see the world. Thankfully, he did. Gave us a great lifestyle. Growing up as an army kid, I have memories that I wouldn't trade for the world. Santa Claus showing up in a little Bell helicopter, Santa Claus showing up in an APC, an armored personnel carrier, getting to go for a ride in the armored personnel carrier, throwing up in the back of the armored personnel carrier. It's not many kids that can say that they had that kind of lifestyle. Growing up on army bases, doing the obstacle course at Duntroon, swimming in the pool next to servicemen and women that were struggling along in full packs, and we're just swimming up and down beside them. Drill sergeant shouting out, "If those kids beat you, you guys are going to be doing this all day." When I think of their service, the things that they sacrifice, I am in awe. Even though it happens so very, very often, war is not a natural state for people. The people that love war are few and far between. And there's always that thought of, why do the soldiers fight? In World War One, particularly at the Christmas truce of 1914, the soldiers just put their guns down and they went over and realized that they were just blokes. Why do these soldiers choose to fight and die for a government because somebody tells them to? It's a mystery to me. I don't understand it. Because war is not our natural state. The human mind is not built to deal well with killing and fighting. I think of all the young diggers. It's a term of affection for Australian soldiers, our diggers, coming back from places like Afghanistan, Iraq. The men and women that went and served because nobody else would, who obediently went to help, which is what the servicemen and women thought they were doing in Afghanistan. They thought they were helping. And I think about the struggle that they have when they come back. And I want to tell you something. I want to give you some advice today. Talk to your veteran. If you have somebody in your family who is a veteran, ask them about their service. If they don't want to talk about it, they won't talk about it. I had a wonderful moment with my brother in the Australian War Memorial. they were allowing veterans who had served in TK and Tarin Kowt in Afghanistan to sign a part of the wall. And you signed your name, your rank, and who you were with when you served in Afghanistan. You had to ask for a pen, and the attendant at the memorial would ask you what branch of service you were in, how long you were overseas. And my brother, in a highly emotional state, was asked how long he served for. And his answer was simple, but I don't think a veteran could give a better answer. She asked how long he was in TK. He'd served there accumulatively, I think, for a couple of years. Not all in one stretch, but he went back 4 times. She asked him how long he served for in Tarin Kowt. And Mike said, long enough. I can't think of a better way for him to have answered that question. I took the woman aside. I explained to her that, yes, he had served. I asked him what he was going to write on the wall in her earshot, and he listed off his unit designation, whatever it was. And he signed the wall. I'm particularly proud that a living member of my family has their name on the wall of the war memorial. Yes, my mum, dad, father, great family are all listed in the memorial, not on the wall of memory because, of course, they all came back. But you have to go into a computer. You have to go into a book on the nominal roll of people that served in any conflict or in the military. None of them have their name on the wall. None of them earned medals. None of them will show up in history books apart from a name listed in the index. But their service is real. They did everything that was asked of them. And I'm so very, very proud of them. But having your brother acknowledged for his service by allowing him to put his name on a wall, and the display is going to be preserved and it's going to be used in the memorial at different times, to know that my brother's name is always going to be up there because he wasn't wounded in combat, but he didn't come back unscarred. He and so many other veterans suffered the indignity of coming back to an army culture that did not value them enough, that discarded them when they were not up to grade anymore. When he came home from his last deployment, it was very, very clear that something was very wrong with his mental health. The army fought him at every step in trying to prove that he was hurt. His mental health had been broken. When it was discovered that, yes, he had severe mental illness problems, the army, due to its policy, booted him out. Said, you can never be a soldier anymore. What I don't understand is that the army spent hundreds of thousands of dollars training my brother to be a specialist in a specialist corps, the RAME, the Royal Australian Electrical Mechanical Engineers. Spent hundreds of thousands of dollars training him. Why could he not have just gotten a job in the army where he knew that he was never going to go up in rank? He knew that he was never going to have to serve overseas again, but he was doing a job that he loved around people that understood him, understood his mental health struggles, and just let him do that job. Let him stay in the army. Let him keep his honor. Let him be honored by the army that he may never have been able to be 100% a soldier ever again. I don't know. But we never got the chance to find out because the army just boots these people out. You've got somebody that comes back from war. They're in a community where at least people have an inkling of what struggle they're going through because they all are to a certain extent in the army. And what's the first thing that the army does when they find out that these people aren't 100% anymore? They kick them out. They lose all that connection to something that they've worked for years. All of a sudden, it's gone. Everything that made them feel that their service had some honor, that they were a part, they were uh, respected because of their service, because of the uniform that they got to wear every day. Now, of course, some soldiers couldn't wait to get out of the army, and that's fine, that's their choice. But so many soldiers came back and would have kept serving. Think of the knowledge that he could impart as a veteran who had served in a war zone to young soldiers coming through. Sure, he might not have been able to work 5 days a week. He could have worked 3 days, 2 days, 1 day a week. Why could he not work 1 day a week? Think of the knowledge that he brought back from serving in a war zone to the young soldiers, to other soldiers, to new officers coming through, the advice he could have given, the wisdom he could have imparted if he had have been allowed to maintain his dignity and keep the job that he loved. Now, I'm not speaking for my brother because maybe he wanted to get out of the army. Maybe he wanted to get away from it as fast as he could. And that's fine. That's his choice and good on him. 100% credit. Whatever he decides to do, that's him. But what if the army had have said to him, "Hey, we understand that you are a valued resource. Why don't they put them in the reserves?" Because it's a step down for a soldier. For somebody like us, it's, I work in maybe a five-star hotel and you want me to go work in a hotel motel. You want me to go work in a pub. Yeah, it's a similar work, but the status is completely different. Why can't these servicemen and women retain their rank, retain their position, and the army work with them? And of course, this would be much more difficult for an infantry soldier, but it could be done. We know that it could be done. I mean, look at all the changes we made for sacrifice. We stopped the whole world. And yet we can't find a way for soldiers to retain their dignity while they're struggling with their mental health. Why can't we allow them to keep them the essence of who they are in their workplace instead of just saying, "Thank you for your service, see you later," discarding them? I think that's one of the great tragedies, and I hope that it's something that somebody will point out to the army and say, "Why can't these people be retained in their job?" My brother was working in a workshop in a particular place. He had a small group of men that were underneath him. Why could he not have taken on, say, an advisor's rank or position, an assistant to the RSM, the regimental sergeant major, the ASM? Why couldn't he? And all of the soldiers that came back from the war that really they loved the army, they loved the lifestyle. Why can't we allow them to keep some of this dignity because now forevermore he was a soldier. That old adage, so old soldiers never die. They don't. They are always soldiers. They always will be. You don't just become a soldier and then you're not a soldier anymore once you finish. Once it's in you, it's in you. I've seen that through my family members. My advice, as I said, is if you know a veteran, ask them about their service. Talk to them about their service. I sat down and went through my brother's slideshow of all the photos he took while he was overseas. He kept apologizing for how boring it was. I was not bored for one instant of 1 second. I was fascinated. What was this? What did you do here? Why did you do this? What was going on here? A veteran will tell you if they can't talk about something. A veteran will stop talking if it's too much for them. And you, as somebody who loves them and cares for them, can see, is this conversation hurting them or is it helping them? I always quiz a serviceman or woman when I meet them about where they served, who they served with, their rank, all that kind of inconsequential stuff. I don't ask, did you kill someone? It would be ridiculous. But I will ask, where did you serve? What corps were you in? How do we honour the veterans that have come before us? For me, that's the way that I do it. I ask them about their service. I'm devastated that I never thought to record my pop, my granddad, telling his stories about the war. Because to the best of our family's knowledge, I'm the only person he ever spoke to about them. I wish I had that record. I wish I had have insisted that he just, even if he had have written a page of what his service was like while he was in Vietnam, while he was in the army, it would be a resource that would be priceless to me. I want to finish by saying thank you to any and all servicemen and women that may be listening to this. Thank you so much for your service. You are honored. You are appreciated. And your service will never be forgotten. I often think about the thousands and thousands of names on the wall of memory in the Australian War Memorial. You see little poppies put in next to people's names, and that's where relatives and friends, they just put a little poppy to say, I came here, I remembered you. Always try and find one name on that list. Just one that I haven't seen before. I just say their name out loud so you're not forgotten. And I hope that in the future, other people will do that. Maybe they'll see another name. There is a pride that you deserve for your service, your sacrifice. And it's a debt that our country can never repay to you. I know intimately what you've given up. I know intimately the wounds that you came back with, both seen and unseen. Your pain is real. My brother now gets some of the best care that Australia can provide. They have these cards that they give to veterans that were wounded and served and came back with different health issues. Well, my brother now gets the best care. I am so grateful for that. He has the ability to access psychological care that I could not even dream of affording in my wildest fantasies. And I don't begrudge him that. I'm so grateful that our country can repay him for his service in that small way of just caring for them the best that we absolutely can. The support that you are getting, to me, is the best use of my taxes that there could possibly be. Any and all support that you are given by this country, you deserve it. It is ANZAC Day 2022. Thank you for listening. And of course, thank you to the veterans who served past and present, those that gave their lives, those that carry wounds that you can see and the wounds that you can't see. Thank you. God bless you all. Thank you for listening to Shattered the podcast. I'd like to thank our producer, Meredith Brosnan, our executive producer, Torian Lau, and the band Adelaide for allowing us to use their song as our theme. Go to shatteredthepodcast.com for more information.